In the 1980s, a library manager met a special customer. His face was gloomy. His eyes were empty. His clothes were messy. His hair was messy. His black t-shirt was dirty and shiny. His mouth was disgusting and his teeth were rotten. And his body was like a mountain goat from inside to outside. He seemed to have some kind of beast-like aggressiveness. But he could not think of it. Standing in front of him was Richard Ramirez, the #1 serial killer in the United States, known as the Black Night Stalker. The capture of the devil is still going on. Today, we will continue to talk about the second episode of the Black Night Stalker. In the last episode, the murderer had an ancestral tooth, which became the key to the case. Because of the unbearable pain, he returned to the dental clinic. Jirka, who observed everything, arranged for 2 police officers to wait outside the clinic. But the leaders above thought he was wasting time. Everyone thought the murderer would not appear again. Because this place did not belong to Jirka's jurisdiction, he could only withdraw the police officers, and only installed a glass machine in the room. But the next day, the dentist at the dental clinic called. That night, the murderer did come to the clinic again. But no matter how he pulled the alarm, it didn't work. The alarm in this film went out. Again. They crossed swords with the killer. On July 20th, 1985, on the 125th day of the crime, another pair of elderly people died miserably. Blood was all over the place. The husband's head was almost cut off. The wife's face was torn to shreds. The scene was unbearable. But there was no bloodstain on the scene this time. It was just a 22mm pistol, which was used in the same way as the Delgado. It was when the police thought that the murderer had begun to conceal traces. Not long after, the murderer committed 2 crimes in one night. An adult woman and a boy were assaulted. The scene was left with an Iberian bloodstain. There was also a 22mm pistol. His style of crime began to fade. He would sneak into someone else's house at night. First kill the man in the house, then assault the woman, and never let go of the child. From the description of the woman after the death, the murderer's features are exactly the same as before. This shows that the police's tracking direction is correct. However, one thing to be repeated is that no matter who he is, there will be a day when he makes a mistake. On August 6, 1985, on the 142nd day of the crime, the police were having a meeting. They got a call from the police again. 2 people were shot in Balin. The murderer sneaked into the house in the middle of the night and fired at the couple. Although the gun hit the head of 2 people, it accurately bypassed the key part. The murderer was chased out by the victim for the first time. He could only flee in a hurry. This time, the murderer used a 25mm pistol. And there was a red mark on the shell. After entering the core door of the crime lab, 2 bullets came from this bullet. Because now no one uses red smoke to make bullets. At the same time, the whole city began to panic. Everyone went to buy guns, buy dogs, learn how to fight. The locks became very tight. Even the police began to worry and fear. The murderer was moved to the newspaper and TV media. Everyone gave the monster a name. The house was surrounded by night stalkers. This case has become big news. Countless police officers went to the crime scene. In addition to Frank and Jack, no police officers took the murderer seriously. Everyone just watched the fun. Not long after, a murder happened in San Francisco. 66-year-old Mr. Pan was shot in the head and died on the spot. Mrs. Pan was arrested. After killing the murderer opened the refrigerator to eat, and then deliberately vomited in the kitchen. This time, he not only hung the symbol of the 5 stars on the wall, but also wrote the words that symbolized Satan. It's like a joke. The police in San Francisco began to panic. They found Frank and Jack. They found bullets in this case. There was also red smoke in the previous case. They finally believed this was a terrible serial killer. The police in San Francisco found the mayor of San Francisco at the time, hoping to reward the killer. However, the mayor of San Francisco immediately held a press conference. The reward is the reward. But he has also exposed all the details of the case in front of the media, including the key Iberia agreement and a gun of the same caliber. In this way, Jack and Frank's previous efforts are once again back to square one. The murder is still happening. The murderer even deliberately told the victim that he was the Night Stalker. He seemed to like the name everyone gave him. This kind of rampage is really scary. However, things suddenly changed. Not long after, a car repairman found a suspicious car. He drove very slowly and was still looking around. The car repairman recorded part of the license plate and leaked the news to the media. Soon someone called and said there was a similar car that had recently been stolen in China. The license plate on the stolen car coincided with the part of the car that the car repairman recorded. The killer came back from San Francisco. The car was immediately positioned in a parking lot. But the killer never came back. A colleague from the crime lab took fingerprints from the rearview mirror of the car. But whether the fingerprints were the killer's required the killer's fingerprint card to be compared. And according to the technology at the time, if you want the killer's fingerprint card, you have to catch him first. The clue was short. But not long after, the police received a call from a woman. She said her father had a friend named Rick, who was probably the Night Stalker. Frank found this father. He said Rick once said he killed an Asian couple. What he used at the time was a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Rick gave him the gun. And he brought the pistol to Tijuana and gave it to someone else. So the two detectives went to Tijuana and found the gun. They also found a large radio. The 83-year-old Mabel happened to have a radio on the day of the crime. Because the radio was bought by Mabel's grandson. He also kept the receipt of the radio number at the time. The police used the number to match the radio. As a result, the radio was stolen by the killer. At the same time, a police informant handed over a bracelet. He thought it might be related to the Night Stalker. This bracelet was taken from his mother-in-law. The police found this mother-in-law. The mother-in-law said the bracelet was given to her by her boyfriend's friend, Rick. He also told the police that Rick had a hat with AC/DC on it and a member card with a black jacket on it. There was a picture of him. This is exactly what they have been investigating. JRK and Frank immediately found the mother-in-law's boyfriend. After the interrogation, they found out the real name of Rick. With the name, Frank and JRK were able to find fingerprints in the database and compare them with the killer's fingerprints that the car had taken. There were 8 people soon. The fingerprints were locked. He had no serious criminal record and no violent behavior. After verification, Richard Ramirez was the Night Stalker. Frank and JRK planned to stay still and carry out the arrest quietly. But the leaders were anxious to announce Richard's name and identity as a result. They might let Ramirez go. Frank and JRK couldn't let him leave Los Angeles. Unexpectedly, Ramirez had already left the city. He went to Arizona to visit a brother. When he returned to the city, he recognized the police at a glance. But he didn't know the police were arresting him. He walked along the street to a shop selling wine. He saw his photo on the front of the newspaper. He realized he was wanted. He was very nervous and quickly left the shop and got on a bus. He wanted to go to East LA to find his brother. On the bus, everyone was holding newspapers in their hands and staring at him. A passenger rang the bell. Ramirez saw the passenger got off the bus and called him. He knew he was wanted. He chose to jump off the bus. But he didn't expect the passenger didn't let him go. He stopped a car and started chasing him. People reported his whereabouts. Countless people followed him. He ran to the highway and arrived in Indiana. At that moment, he wanted to hijack a car and run away. The driver was a tough guy. He didn't know he had no choice but to run away. Everyone recognized him. He was a wild man. But no one was afraid of him. Everyone was chasing him. Someone hit him with a stick. Someone hit him with a car. Someone shot him. Everyone wanted to kill him. At that moment, the police appeared and brought him to the police station. The whole police station was surrounded by the people around him. Everyone was screaming as if the world championship had won. They were happy that Ramirez was finally caught. But he had to go through a long process because he had too many crimes. This is the most difficult and the longest criminal trial in American history. Because this trial involved nearly 1.600 people. There were more than 100 witnesses. On October 24, 1985, Richard Ramirez shocked the whole court. This man was accused of committing 14 murders and the whole of California was in panic. He even opened his palm and let the whole world see the 5 stars in his hand. That was the sign of the devil. It was the beginning of a person's loss of humanity. Just when the court was closed, Ramirez didn't forget to say a word. He looked like a primitive beast, but it was the attraction of this beast that attracted countless women. His fame was getting bigger and bigger. There were extra security measures. Many people gathered outside to see the face of this serial killer. Some even shouted for the killer and believed he was innocent. When Ramirez's case entered the trial stage, the case had already cost more than $1 million. Even one witness had already died. However, justice will eventually overcome evil. The real trial will never let go of such a beast that does evil in the world. After experiencing a series of legal delays, on September 20th, 1989, the court sentenced Ramirez to death for the murder of on November 7th, 1989, Ramirez was sentenced to death. After being sentenced to death, he tried to appeal, but the sentence was delayed. On June 7, 2013, Richard Ramirez spent more than 20 years in prison waiting for the execution of the death sentence because his liver had fallen out. Although the devil had left the world, what he left for people was a deep reflection of what led a person to do what he did. For Ramirez, his dark childhood was undoubtedly a catalyst for his human nature from being a good person to a doomed evil. When he was young, he had an idol, his cousin, Mike, who came back from Vietnam. He always told Ramirez about those bloody scenes, and even shot his own wife. This shocked the young Ramirez greatly. Under the misguided guidance, Ramirez began to gradually break away from his heart. When he was on trial, he never regretted his cold smile. After his sentence, he provoked everyone to hate him. He wanted to be a different person. In the end, this is still an unconfident performance. If someone led the family when he was wrong, would there be a completely different result? Okay. That's all for today. If you like it, welcome to subscribe to our channel. Go to the center of attention and pay attention to the topic. See you next time.